face I've ever seen.
I think I missed that one.
Alright, so it's kind of cold in here, right? This is the secret house. So it's kind of cold in here, but it's only around 50 degrees right now. And did you know that whenever the early church was facing persecution, one of the places that some of the congregations met was underneath the cities in the catacombs. Who knows what a catacomb is?
I do. It's like a underground passageway. I don't know, I've heard of like the Paris catacombs.
Alright, they're underground. What's special about them though? It's not just an underground tunnel or cave.
It's a tomb.
There you go. An underground tomb. It's where they put dead people underneath the city. And whenever you go into a cave, how cool is it?
Around 6 degrees around.
Yeah. So it's usually 50 to 60 degrees depending on where you're at, water, some other stuff going on. So just imagine it's like 50 degrees in here. Imagine it being that temperature, no heat. They are in the summertime, but in the winter, no heat. You have to bring your own blanket. You can't be too loud or people will come in and kill you if they find you. And so we have it really lucky whenever we come in. We're like, brr, turn that heater up. Why isn't the heat going better? No, we have it great because we don't have to meet right down the tunnel from dead bodies with their stench and everything, with all of the fun that comes with being underground, of being cool and damp and disease prone. So we should count ourselves pretty lucky. That intriguing of a story, wasn't it? All right, what are we talking about this week? Stewardship. Who wants to explain to me what stewardship is? Does anybody know what we're studying this week? I told you we're doing stewardship. It's not a word we use every day. Have you ever heard of someone being a steward?
I really haven't.
No. Anybody here read Lord of the Rings?
Okay, so that's what I was thinking of in the movies where he was a steward to the throne. So he's like a replacement, right? For
What
a
he-
short time.
What he was supposed to be. All right, a steward is supposed to be a caretaker. That is a simple, not the best, but one word explanation. A caretaker. If I have a farm with 1,000 cows on it, no, let's make it 10. Let's make it something more realistic. I have 10 cows, and I'm going to be out of the country for a couple of months. And I say, Anna, could you take care of my cows while I'm gone? And Anna says, yes, I will. Anna becomes the steward of my cows. They are not her cows in that case, but she is the one taking care of them. So we are stewards of certain things, whether we know it or not. What is something that we are stewards of? In your life. This doesn't have to apply to everybody. Who bought your first car? You can't drive yet, but who bought your first car?
It's been the same for.
Alright? So if someone else buys your car and gives it to you, in a sense, you did not earn that. It has been placed in your care. A lot of times the tags are in your parents' name, the in your parents' name, but you are the one that gets to drive it. You are a steward of that car. It's not your physical possession, whether or not you claim it or not. On paper, it's your parents, and your parents have put you in control of that vehicle. That's kind of a silly example, but spiritually speaking, are we stewards of certain things? All right? To a degree, God's Word. We have it kind of in our possession, for lack of a better phrase, and we can spread it out to others or hoard it away and not spread it to others. We can use it or not use it like we should. What else?
Our souls.
Our souls.
Our
The church kind of, our bodies is where I was going. Okay, our bodies. Are our bodies ours? All right, ultimately, no, right? There's a common phrase, my body, my choice, right? We've all heard that. It's not actually your body, though. It's God's body. Whenever Adam came into possession of his body, how did he do that?
It was breathed into him by God.
All right, his life was breathed into him. But his life was breathed into his body. How did his body get there? How, though?
It was formed from the dust.
There you go. God took dust and formed it into a body. Which is just amazing, right? It's a miracle that we can't fully understand how God took dust and gave us our bodies. But Adam didn't get his body by his own power. It was entrusted to him by God. And whenever we look at it that way, our bodies are actually God's. It makes us treat them a little bit differently. We're just renting our bodies out until we die, if that makes sense. And then our soul will go back to God or to punishment. So our bodies is a good example. The church kind of fits in there. What else? Think broader, more general. What does everybody have besides a body? Besides a
A house.
No, so we have homeless people. Like, you're on the right track, but we have homeless people. So not everybody has a house, but you're on the right track.
The world.
All right. That's more general than I was aiming for, but you're right. What do we have while we are living in the world?
Choice. Food. Friends.
Not everybody has friends. Not everybody has family. There's orphans out there. There are exceptions. You're all doing really good. In a really general sense, everybody has something very important. Time. Everybody has time, right? You might not have as much as somebody else. You might not know how much you have. Not everybody has a sundial. But we have time, right? We have time. And we are going to talk about stewardship of time next week. Because time is something that gets wasted quite easily in our day and time. How hard is it to find something to do to fill up the time whenever you're bored? It's not hard, right? What do we end up doing if we're not careful?
Wasting.
You have your phone?
Yeah.
Can I borrow it?
For what?
Just a second.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm back. I don't know why I'm doing the wrong code, I'm sorry. Anyway, we're bored, right? We just mindlessly scroll. We play a game, right? I remember when Farmville came out, I wasted a ton of time whenever Farmville came out. But we find ways to burn up time because we're bored and we need to be entertained. So we find ways to fill that gap. We're going to talk about time next week, though. What else is something that everybody has to one degree or another? Homeless people are kind of the exception to this rule, but no, not everybody has a TV. There are third world villages where TVs are not in existence there.
Are you going for a home?
No?
I said homeless people would be the exception.
Kind of.
Everyone has a life.
All right? They have a life. They're looking for something in this physical world.
Clothes.
Clothes fits into the more general idea I have in mind. How do you get clothes? There you go, right?
Or you make it.
Or you make it out of sheep. But you had to buy the sheep, you had to trade for the sheep, you had to card the wool, you had to do something of value, right? Money. Everybody to one degree or another has money. Maybe the money you have is just what you can get from your parents or what you can scrounge up working a job whenever you can get there from school. Maybe you got an inheritance of $1 billion from your great uncle or something, but everybody to one degree or another has money, right? So let's go to Matthew chapter 23 and look at something. This is one of my favorite parables. It's not 23, I thought it was there. 25, what was I thinking? 25. Starting in verse 14, all right. For it will be like a man going on a journey, this is talking about the day of the Lord, who called to his servants and entrusted to them his properties. What are these people?
Steward.
Stewards, all right,
What
these are
verse
stewards.
are
Chapter 25, verse 14.
we on? Oh, okay.
Going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted to them his property. So this is not their property, it's the master's property. To one he gave 5 talents. How much is a talent worth?
A year's wages.
All right, a year's wages. So the average household income in America is $50,000 roughly. So let's just guess that it's roughly the equivalent of that. To one he gave $250,000, another $100,000, and to another $50,000. So he gives them something of great value. We kind of think that the one guy's getting gypped, but he's getting entrusted with the equivalent of $50,000 worth of property here. He who had received, then he went away. Then he who had received the 5 talents went at once and traded with them and made 5 talents more. So he's up to $500,000 here. So also he who had the 2 talents made 2 talents more. He's up to $200,000. But he who had received the 1 talent went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. But after a long time, the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. And he who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 talents more, saying, Master, you delivered to me 5 talents. Here I have made 5 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. And he went to the one who had 2 talents. He also, who had the 2 talents, came forward, saying, Master, you delivered to me 2 talents. Here I have made 2 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. He also, who had received the 1 talent, came forward, saying, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you scattered no seed. He's wrong, by the way. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here you have what is yours. But his master answered to him, You wicked and slothful servant, you knew that I reap where I have not sown, and gather where I scattered no seed. Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and at my coming, I should have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to the one who has 10 talents, for to everyone who has will more be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the worthless one into the outer darkness, and that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. This is a representation of the end of time. The talents can be representative of several things, but what we have here is a general principle of Jesus showing the difference between someone who did a good job of handling money and someone who did a poor job of handling money. Now, there are spiritual lessons he's trying to teach, and he's not just trying to teach us to do a good job with the money that we have, but there's an overarching principle here that Jesus is acknowledging there is a good way to handle money and a bad way to handle money. Now, let's take a second and look at America. We're all Americans, right? In American, what's the American dream?
How to be rich or famous or
Alright, so we got like money falling out of the skies on us because we have so much money. What else? All right,
White picket fence.
big house. This is a garage door with like a million trucks out here. I don't know why it looks like a chopped off bus, but it is. All right, so you've got like 10 cars, big garage, big house, money falling out of the sky. You got a nice fence over here. Terrible fence, but it's a fence. Why do people want a white picket fence?
It looks nice.
Well, it looks nice and they're kind of expensive. It's a representation of I'm doing so well, I'm putting up a fence just for looks, not to actually do something. So back in the day, white picket fences were kind of an acknowledgement of wealth. So what does all of this stuff revolve around? Having quite a bit of money. How much money does a good, really nice house cost?
150,000.
All right, yeah. I mean, you're doing really good if you can get what a lot of people would consider to be a nice house for $100,000. But let me ask you this: do you need a white picket fence to go to heaven? All right, so you don't need a white picket fence. What about money falling out of the skies? No, you don't need $1 million in the bank. What about a chopped off bus van?
Nope.
No.
Don't need that.
You don't need 10 chopped off bus vans. What about a huge house?
Don't need that.
Right, you don't need that. Did Jesus have any of that stuff?
Nope.
Was he the epitome of what a child of God should be? Absolutely. All right, whenever someone came to him and said that they wanted to follow him, does anyone remember what his response was? I know that's like several people, but there's one I'm shooting for.
Cast away all your belongings and follow me. Get rid of everything you own.
You're right, that's not the one I'm talking about. Birds of the air have nests. Foxes have holes, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. Jesus was essentially saying, I'm homeless, right? He's always on the move teaching. He's always staying at a different place. He never knows exactly where he's going to end up spending the night. But he was still the epitome of what a child of God should be. If you look back at the prophets, a lot of them, like John the Baptizer, he lived in the wilderness. He wore the cheapest clothes possible, and he had food that was found readily in the wilderness. It didn't cost him anything. He had to go catch his own crickets and eat his own crickets and find honey. You ever try to get honey out of a tree without a smoker? Like, I don't know if he was using a primitive smoker or not, but honey out of a hive is rough to get because you get stung like crazy. But it's out in the wilderness and you can find it if you're in a good forest with a good population of bees. So John was out there getting free food from the woods because he didn't have money to go spend because he was spending his time preaching. So we see people that don't have money that are still very good examples or the epitome of examples of children of God. So let me ask you this. Why is this the American dream? Or our little twisted version of it?
Because they're status symbols.
Okay, their status. It shows that you're successful in this life, right, in worldly terms, and you're keeping up with other people that are doing the same thing, right? Let me ask you this. What is at the core of, well, let me go back and ask this. All right. What does America have that people don't typically look at? Like, whenever you look at America, you think of successful people, a ton of opportunity, great education, healthcare, all the things that America has. But what is looming over all of that?
Poverty.
All right, there's poverty, but what else?
Thanks.
Debt. Absolutely. I'm glad somebody made that connection. Debt is looming over all of that. See this really nice? Everybody looks at that house and they're like, oh, this is so great. There's debt. Everybody's like, this house is so great. I wish I had that house where they could park 10 chopped off minivan buses in their garage because it's so big. But underneath of all that is a crushing mortgage that no one can see. They might be negative $500K in the hole on that house, right? The picket fence, they're making payments on it because they had to make payments on it because they couldn't pay for it outright. What looks to be like money is probably just a facade for the giant mountain of debt they have in front of them. The cars, they might be leasing those, they might not even own them. There's debt everywhere. And get this, people your age, or coming to be that age, are more in debt than anyone has ever been in the history of America. Student loan debt just passed credit card debt, which is huge in America. So the fact that more people in this age group, or coming to be in that age group, have passed credit card debt for all of America with student loan debt just goes to show that they want something that they can't afford and they're using debt to get there. What does Proverbs say about debt? There's a famous verse that Dave Ramsey has kind of hijacked and used. I'll start it for you. The debtor is slave to the lender. The debtor is slave to the lender. And think about that. If you have to take out a big mortgage to get a home, like most people have to, you are not your own person at that point. And we don't think about it like that, but are you in control of your life at that point, or do you always have to do something to be able to meet that debt that you owe to the bank? You have to, or you lose your home and have to go live somewhere else or out on the street, right? We need to be very careful anytime we enter into debt. We need to make sure that we realize that whenever we do enter into debt, that we are making ourselves slaves of those who we are borrowing money from. So whenever you hit that age group where student loans become an option, you need to be very careful about desiring an education to the point where you put yourself 100 grand in the hole. I know somebody that put themselves over 200 grand in the hole getting through school. And that is a huge mountain of debt to try to climb out of. I know people that are 40 still paying off student loans. I know people in their 30s that are throwing themselves a party because they finally got out of their student debt because they finally paid it off after working for 10, 15 years and paying on it. So we need to be very careful about entering. But what drives us to want all of this?
Greed.
All right, greed. That's not where I was going, but greed is a good answer. We just want more, right? Have you ever noticed, I don't know if you guys have ever hit this point in your life, but maybe someday you will. If you make more money, you always find a way to spend it. Like you're always like, I'm making $10 an hour. All right, if I could just make $15 an hour, I would have so much extra money, I would pay off all this other stuff. And then you get to the point where you make $15 an hour, and guess what? It doesn't happen. Like you said, all that stuff would happen, but you're not disciplined enough to make it happen. So you have to be in control and not greedy to the point where you're spending every dollar that you get. Right?
That's exactly what I do.
We're working on that this week. And underneath greed, there's something else that motivates that greed. What else?
We're
You're on
never,
the right page, by the way. I think.
we're never content with what we have.
Actually, I think it's on the next page. All right. Why?
Because we always want more, I guess. I don't know.
All right. Why do we want more, though? Not always, but why oftentimes do we want more?
We live in a society that shows us more. That says you should have this.
And what happens whenever it's put in front of our face? There's a Bible word for it. And it's on the right page. 12-letter word. Starts with a C. Ends in nus. Covetousness. Covetousness.
You shall not covet your neighbor's.
There you go. All right, what's in the main part of this picture?
A house.
A house. Not a human house, a physical house, right? That was a joke. My last name's House. You guys didn't even smoke. All right.
That was funny.
You shall not covet your neighbor's house. But we do that, don't we? Like, if we're not careful, oh man, especially in the day and age we live in, it's so easy to be like, did you see that house that's for sale? There's a house on Ohio that they want $500,000 for. And it's a good looking house, but I don't think it's worth that. But it is a nice looking house. And it's easy to go, oh, that house would be so nice to have. Like, without even recognizing that you're doing it, you're wanting that house. Car, is anybody in here a car person? All right, for a little bit. All right, it's so easy to have somebody pull up like a 68 Camaro that sounds like, you know, it's about to die because it's got such a big cam in it. It's just, it sounds beautiful. And it's so easy to go, oh, man, I would love to have that car. Like, I would just love to have that car. But you don't see that the guy has to fix it like every 2 days because it keeps breaking down. You don't see all that, but you want that car. Like, you might have a car that gets you from A to B without worrying about the tires falling off or, you know, wheel bearings locking up or brakes going out or anything like that. But you're over there going, man, I would love to have that car. Like, you fail to recognize, or I can fail to recognize, that we can get from somewhere that it would have taken 3 days to walk to, we can get there in an hour, right? In an hour. And we're like, this just isn't good enough. I would rather have that one over there. Go ahead and look in Exodus chapter 20. Exodus chapter 20. I don't know exactly why God does this, but I think it's not a mistake. That at the end of giving Israel the 10 Commandments, he puts this one in here in verse 17 at the end. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male servant, or his female servant, or his ox, or his donkey. And this is the big one. Or anything that is your neighbor's. Or anything that is your neighbor's. So he covers, don't covet where he lives. Don't covet who he's with. Don't covet his employees. Don't covet his possessions. And just anything in general. Right? If there's something in there where you're like, well, he didn't say that. No, God covered that. Anything that your neighbor has, don't covet that. What happens whenever you covet something? That's really general, but eventually it can lead to sin. But what before that happens?
You're not thankful for what you have.
Right, you're not thankful. You're not content with what you have. You're not looking at the blessings that God has given you and being thankful for them. It breeds resentment. It breeds resentment. We might not really think about that, but it really breeds resentment. For example, I'll just tell you guys a personal, for instance. All right, so I went to school, graduated from college, went to work, and wasn't making quite the amount that I really wanted to make at the time. Coming fresh out of school, I was making like $13 an hour, which is not that fantastic, but it was a good job in a down economy. And a guy that we went to church with over at Oldfield, he got out of high school and just went to be a union pipe fitter. And he was making $18 out of the gate. And with starting off, and I was kind of resentful of that. Like, I had put in work into it, the economy was down, and somehow this guy was making an easy $5 an hour more, plus overtime and prevailing wage, whenever he didn't put in the work that I'd put in. It's easy to have something like that happen, and you start to resent that rather than just be happy for that person. We can be like that today. We can look ahead, and this tends to happen with people my age and younger, you see something that someone older has, a home, a house, an easier lifestyle, they don't have to work as hard as you do, and you fail to recognize everything that happened before in their life to get to that point. But you want what they have right now, but you don't recognize all the work that went into it to get to that point. So it's very easy for us to just to covet our neighbor's everything. Right? We're talking about money specifically, but it can also be easy to covet the people that are in that person's life. To look at another person's wife and go, man, she is such a good Christian wife, or he is such a good Christian husband. I wish I was married to them, rather than being content with the spouse you have. Not seeing all of the flaws that that person has, just wanting what someone else has. So, man, I'm running bathroom. Okay, so covetousness is really at the forefront of driving us to misuse our money and be poor stewards of money. So as Christians, what should we do with the money that we have?
Give some of it back to God.
All right, that's in there. We should give some of it back to God. We've covered that in a previous class, so I'm glad you remember that one. What else?
Be mindful of your spending it.
All right, be mindful in general of how you're spending it. How about this one? How about be different than the world? And boy, that's hard whenever it comes to money, right? Because on money terms, we and the people in the world all have money. We all need the money that we have to survive. So we have that in common, but we don't have to chase the same things that they chase. Does that make sense? We don't have to define success and failure in the same way that they do. We don't have to fall into the same traps of going into debt to get things to impress people that we don't even like, as Dave Ramsey would say. So we don't have to fall into that trap as Christians, because we know that whatever money we have, the houses we buy, the cars we have, it's all going to burn someday. If it even makes it till then, it's all going to burn up. So it's no use in judging our success by money. Now, yes, we still need to work. We need to have a good work ethic. We need to survive. We need to support the church. We need money in our lives, but we don't judge success by the same standard as everybody else. I'm going to throw this one out for you guys too. Can I borrow your phone again? I promise I won't put in a weird passcode this time. Don't do this, okay? This is what not to do. What social media am I on? Just give me one.
Facebook.
All right, Facegram. It's new. It's new. All right, you're sitting here, you're scrolling, you're like, oh man, they have such a nice house. Oh, look at that new car, right? Look at that new car that person's doing. It's not actually over there, that's pumpkins. Look at these pumpkins that somebody grew. I wish I could grow pumpkins like that. You just sit here, and if you're not careful, if you guys are not careful, you'll fall into this trap of sitting here mindlessly scrolling through social media going, oh, I wish I had that stuff. Like, I feel like a failure because all these other people have all this other stuff, and I'm not content at all with what I have. So you got to be very, very careful. Thank you for that.
Social media is something that really drives you to do that. I was talking with my friend Jeremy the other day. He was saying how he liked the post, it was a while back, of me and Amanda being on IHOP. After that, he got 12 straight ads for IHOP. It's like, look, they're at IHOP. Shouldn't you be at IHOP?
All right. I wasn't going to bring this up, but social media has a very good way of, I think they're listening to me, because I will mention like, oh, I was thinking about growing flat Dutch white boar pumpkins. And all of a sudden there'll be an ad for flat Dutch white boar pumpkins on Facebook or on Google or whatever. But anyway, it has been engineered by people smarter than us to make you want to spend more time on there and spend money. There's a reason that they drive ads at you. I thought it was the dumbest thing in the world whenever Facebook got turned loose in the stock market, became a public company. I did not recognize that they were going to start pushing ads and they were going to make a ton of money off of it. YouTube makes a ton of money off of it. Everything that we do that has social media on there is driving us to spend money. And we don't necessarily think about that. We drive down the road and we'll see a sign on the side and it's telling us, come spend money at Pizza Ranch. Well, we recognize that that's just a sign paid for by Pizza Ranch to make us want to go spend money there. But we don't recognize it as much whenever we're just doing this. And we don't even remember it, but it's stuck there in our brain because we saw it. So we need to be very, very careful about spending too much time on a platform that will drive us to covet what other people have. Does that make sense? I'm not saying that Facebook is the devil or anything like that, but we need to be very, very careful about how we
It is.
how we put how we consume our time and how we handle things that can drive us to covet. Because coveting eventually, whether or not you recognize it, will lead to spiritual decay. Whenever you said it can lead to sin, I was thinking of Ahab. If you go back to 1 Kings and you start reading, Ahab was a horribly wicked king, and he was living in Samaria, and there was a vineyard, and he wanted that vineyard. A guy named Naboth owned it, and he wouldn't sell it to him. And he wanted it to have as a garden he could go walk in next to where he lived, but Naboth would not sell it to him. So eventually he started moping and pouting like a 4-year-old really. His wife comes in and says, what's wrong? He explains it, and she says, all right, I'll get it for you. And so he's like, okay. So she has him killed. She has fake witnesses say that he sinned. They take him out of the city and stone him to death, and then she takes that vineyard and gives it to her husband, and he is just so overjoyed. Like, he was a wicked person in general, but his lust and desire to have what someone else had led to him stamping his approval on his wife, who was even worse than him, sin. We don't want to be on the same level as Ahab and Jezebel of wanting what someone else has and compromising godly values because we want it so badly. So whenever it comes to money, I'm not going to tell you how to spend money. Everyone's going to make a different amount, have different expenses, even live in different places where the pricing is different and the standard of living is different. But we need to be careful in how we spend our money. Don't pile debt on yourself so big that you can't get out, and don't just live an ungodly lifestyle in general that makes you spend money that you shouldn't spend. Does that make sense? All right, next week we're going to talk about stewardship, and we're going to talk about time, which is worth more than money whenever you boil it down. Time. So think about time this week as you guys are studying. Thank you guys.